Welcome! This video provides a step-by-step tutorial on how to create a Dutch door fold card for Christmas using the Poinsettia petal bundle. This is the first project of my November series. The second project in this series is a gift card holder. For those of you who purchased my class kit, please take a moment now to make sure that you have all of the pieces shown here. It should all be in the envelope provided. I've also added the dimensions if you want to create this project from scratch, and a full list of materials can be found at my blog. Before we jump into assembling the card project, I want to show you how I made the card base using the Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer and scorer. So I'm turning my 8.5 by 11 sheet horizontal, and my first cut is going to be at 4 1/4. Once I move that piece out of the way, my next slice will be at 2 1/2. Next, I'm going to score, and grabbing my bigger piece, the 4 1/4 by 8.5, I'm scoring at 5 1/2 inches. On the thinner piece, I'm at 2 1/8 of an inch, and then I flip it over and do 2 1/8 of an inch again. Next, I'm going to start folding this smaller piece. This is the bottom part of the card, and you'll notice here that no matter how precise your score lines are, it might be a little off. So I used my bone folder to flatten it, but I put the two middle pieces together, and that way it folded perfectly flat. So for all my class participants, this is already done for you. Same thing for this top fold. I line up the bottom piece, and then I fold over the top, lining it up perfectly with the bottom piece before I start scoring. This will always help get your lines precisely where you want them. Next, I'm going to show you how I trim down my 6x6 'Tis the Season designer paper. My class participants, you need to make a hard decision now and choose which side of the paper you want to use. For the first trim, I'm cutting all the way down at 4 inches. And then the skinny piece left over is at 1 7/8 of an inch. Flip it horizontally. Trim your first cut at 2 1/4, and repeat that one more time. For the bigger piece, it was trimmed at 4 inches, and now it's being cut at 2 3/4. For my class participants, this is where you guys will start assembling the card. Make sure to get the skinny folded door pieces here and the big white piece. And I'm going to use liquid glue so that way I can shimmy it and make sure that I line it up exactly against the bottom part of the card. If you're using any kind of liquid glue, make sure to use it sparingly. We don't want to warp the card. All right, so now I'm lining it up along the bottom edge. And again, the liquid glue gives it a little bit of wiggle room. I can use my fingers to make sure that it's flush against all 3 edges. And next, we're going to start gluing on our designer series paper. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this to all of my crafty friends. It is so hard for me to pick which side of the DSP to use. I hope it's an easier choice for you. And again, this is the 'Tis the Season Designer Series paper in the mini holiday catalog. So you're making sure to leave a white border around each of these segments of the front of the card as you're applying your designer paper. Next, I'm going to show you how I stamped the two pieces, both the inside greeting and then the front of the card greeting. I made quite a few class kits, so I love my Stamparatus for that reason. And I used Real Red on the Warm Wishes sentiment and Smoky Slate on the two other pieces. I picked Smoky Slate because it kind of resembled the silver. It doesn't have the shine, but it still went with the color theme for this card. Next, I'm going to show you how I heat embossed the silver greeting on the front of the card, the Merry Christmas sentiment. You start by using an embossing buddy, anti-static tool. Just lays down a little bit of layer of powder before I stamp my image. The embossing powder is a very fine powder that sticks easily to oils or anything else, any kind of moisture on the card. I use a Versamark clear sticky ink. And then you add the embossing powder. So it's still loose right now, sticking to the sticky ink. And I'm going to use my heat tool. And many different crafters have many different styles or methods to use their heat tool. I use it about 3 times on my embossed piece. One on the top, one on the bottom, and then the last one on the top. And you can see it starting to melt. The powder actually melts together. And the reason that I do the 3 passes for the heat tool is to minimize the warping. But if you have time, you can also just lay your stamp block on it, etc. There's lots of different methods, again, to using the heat tool. Now we're going to adhere the front greeting, the one that says Merry Christmas, to the green piece of paper in your kit. Okay, there should be a thin green border around all the sides. The bigger sentiment is going to be glued on the inside. Again, I prefer the liquid glue. Again, use it sparingly to avoid warping. I like the liquid glue because it gives you some wiggle room to position it. For the front of the card, you're going to lay it down first to make sure you see a red border along all sides. Okay, we don't want to glue on the bottom 2 pieces. We are just going to be gluing the upper half of your sentiment piece. Okay, so the trick here is lay it down, position it where you want, pinch it with your fingers. And that kind of just gives you a little guideline. You want to glue above it. It does not need to go right down to the middle. Just put some glue towards the top. And again, position it down and give it some time to dry before you really manipulate your card. Now this is the fun part for me. Assembling the poinsettia. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you quickly the pieces that I used. This monstrosity of dies. I layer it for my classes when I'm doing my class prep with this blue painter's tape that I can remove afterwards. But it's super useful for when you're die cutting the same pieces over and over again instead of having to lay out the individual die cut metal pieces each time. So when I glue it all together, sorry, not glue, when I use the painter's tape, it makes it easier to transfer from scrap paper to scrap paper. And there we are. We got all of our cut pieces. I ran this through my cut and emboss machine. And now you can optionally, your choice, if you want to shape the petals. I'm just putting my finger under each petal and using my other hand to push the petal, the sides of the petal down over my finger. You can do this to all of the bigger pieces, the 3 bigger pieces. And for the little one, I'm just using my finger to roll the little edges. Can't shape it in the same way as the big ones. But I'm just folding it down over my finger. Okay, you can press the petals up to give them a little bit more dimension. In fact, I'm going to do that with my other pieces, folding them up at the center. And now you're going to see I gave you guys some dimensionals. You're going to want to grab the big white hexagon dimensional and put that on your biggest, the top of your biggest petal piece. Again, you'll notice there's 4 sizes of these petals. You're going to grab the next smallest size. I'm staggering my leaves. You can lay out your leaves however you'd like. Now you can just use glue. I'm using glue dots, a double-sided adhesive dot. I like this because there's no dry time. And I'm just layering the pieces 1 size smaller each time. So there's my poinsettia. Now you'll see that I gave you guys 3 pearls in the class kit. So you can just use your fingers very carefully to pick these up off of the plastic backing, but I'm going to show you this take the pick tool. There's a spatula on one end and this tacky material on another. So I'm actually just going to have you guys all just use your finger to push the pearls off of their off of the plastic. You don't have to push it far, you're just kind of moving it just a little bit. And that'll help you release it from the paper and be able to grab it easier. So I'm using the tacky piece, the tacky end of my take your pick tool. And so I'm picking them up and sticking them down. So you can use tweezers, you can use your fingers, you can use anything here. This tool has about 4 different options on both ends, so it's a very useful crafting tool. That little die kit, you will notice there is 1 extra little die kit poinsettia in your package, and that's for you to use however you'd like. But now that our poinsettia is done, I like to lay out all of my die cut pieces, and I like to do this before I glue anything down, so that way I can visualize where everything is going to go. Now these little sprigs, you can make this easy, super easy, and leave them whole, and your card would look wonderful just like that. Or optionally, you can use your scissors and cut them a little bit, so that way you have more pieces to glue down. Totally up to you. Again, make this simple. You can make this super creative, however you'd like to use these sprigs. I encourage you to play around with it. And once you have it all laid out, then you can go ahead and start gluing it down. whatever your creative process is. This is just mine. And we're almost finished. You'll notice that there are 4 mini black dimensionals in your card kit. I'm just showing you here that you can also add dimensionals all throughout the front of this card. And I do this so that easily when you mail this, all the pieces will potentially lay flat. But by adding dimensionals, like under this leaf here, it just adds some dimension to your project. So you can do this under the leaves, you can do this under the petals. Dimensionals are a really great embellishment, or a way to embellish your card. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and I'll see you next time.